I love Acts 17. I love this passage of Scripture. And actually, I have 3 layers of love for it. I have had a long history of loving this passage, Acts 17, but I've come into 3 sort of different understandings of it that I wanted to share with you this morning. So I'm going to put this up on the screen. Here are the 3 ways that I have come to this. So the first way that I hear most people talk about this, in the way that I was taught Acts 17, is that the Athenians were trying to cover all of their bases. So this statue to the unknown God was sort of a just in case. Like, we have hundreds of gods, right, in the pantheon, and we have statues to each of them. But what if we forgot one? And so we have this statue to an unknown God. That's how most people read it, as a plain reading, and it gets taught in like Sunday school to like high school Sunday school or whatever, and that's how most people have come to it. But it turns out, if you learn a little bit about the history behind this passage, it gets oh so much better. 600 years before, in Athens, there had been a plague, and many people were sick and dying. And they were so baffled about what God to sacrifice to get this plague to relent, to take away the sickness, that they actually reached out to somebody from a different tradition, if you will. He was from Crete. He's called a Cretan, right? So they reached out to this Cretan, and his name was Epimenides. And he comes in, and he has a little bit different of an approach. And so he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to confess that we are ignorant, that we don't know which God to sacrifice to. We don't know how to get this plague to stop, and we're going to plead ignorance. We're going to throw ourselves in front of this God that we don't know, the question mark God, and we're going to see how we should proceed. So he comes with this idea, and they get these sheep, and they lead them out into this lush pasture that has not been grazed. And they concocted this scheme that whatever sheep laid down instead of grazing, which was ridiculous because obviously it was an amazing field to graze on, like the backside of Alpenrose where they have the bulls right now. I see them every morning when I drive in. I always think it's weird that there are bulls grazing on a hill inside the Portland city limits. That's a fun thing for me. I love it. Anyway, I was born on a dairy farm, if you didn't know that, so I'm fascinated with cattle. So whatever sheep laid down, that's the one they would sacrifice. So a weird thing happened. They put the sheep out into the pasture, and a whole bunch of them laid down. So they kind of had to call an audible, like, this is not what we thought was going to happen. So Epimenides reminds them, yeah, but remember, we're ignorant. We don't know. This is right to the God we don't know. And so they said, well, what should we do? And so they said, all of these sheep that have laid down, we'll sacrifice all of them, right, in our ignorance to try and get this plague to relent. Well, it worked. And in gratefulness, on each of the altars that the sheep had been sacrificed on, they put a plate or an engraving to the unknown God. This is a part of the legend of this community, right, of their heritage. And so it's into this environment that Paul walks 600 years later, and he sees an opportunity. And he says, hey, you know how you have all these statues to all these gods laying around? And there's one out there that really caught my attention. It's to the unknown God. Can I talk to you about that God? This is an amazing thing because in an age of missions, Don Richardson is this author, and he wrote a book called Eternity in Their Hearts. The title comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and Dory read it for us earlier that said, God has placed eternity in the hearts of all humans. Right? This is, some people call it the God-shaped vacuum, or whatever you want to call it, right? The eternity in the hearts. And this passage says that God set it up this way so that people would wander searching for the truth. Right? Searching for God. So Paul walks in, and because it models for us not going in with all of the answers, but going in with eyes open and hearts open and ears open to see what seeds of eternity have been planted in our culture to which we say to people, hey, you know this thing that we sort of like all question, that we all wonder about? Can I talk to you about that thing? It's a different model of evangelism or missions, and it comes from a humble place because it's looking for God-placed seeds in every culture. It's sort of a beautiful thing, and I love it. So that was 10 years ago that I wrote on that. And in the recent couple years, I've come to a third sort of appreciation for this passage, which is that I've noticed that Christians, and I'm not looking at anybody in particular when I say this morning, have gotten a little cocky again, a little overconfident. The sin of certainty has crept back in to where we now are the ones who have all the answers, and we are doing the proclaiming to people who are ignorant, right? We have forgotten that God is at work in places we have yet to be, and what we're to do is to find God in those places and to partner with God to bring about a fuller understanding. And we've gotten a little cocky. Part of it is a defensiveness because we live in an interreligious world, and so we've put up our hackles, we've gotten a little defensive, maybe we've gotten a little arrogant. So I think there's something in this passage that we might have to revisit or embrace, which is the fact that there's something unknown about God. No matter how much we know, there's more that we don't know than we do know. For if God is infinite, however much we know about God, there's infinitely more to know. So if we embrace the mystery, there is this thing that I'm calling this morning the unknownness of God. Now, for those of you who are English majors, that's going to drive you crazy, but I'm a philosopher, so I get to mess with the words. So I'm going to put up something else for you. I want to walk this through a very Methodist lens. So in the Methodist tradition, we have this thing called the Wesleyan quadrilateral. It's sort of how we discern and make decisions and how we proceed. Because it's possible when I talk about the unknownness of God that some of you will say, whoa, hold on. We know a lot about God. For instance, the Bible. There's a lot in the Bible that we know about God. That's true. Scripture does reveal much about the nature and character of God. God's dealing with God's people throughout history. We know that. We also have tradition. Some of you who are really into church history and this tradition that's been handed down to us. So not just in the Bible, but since then, we've come to know a lot more about God. And that's very true. Then we have a third layer, which is reason. That we live in an age of reason. And so you're not supposed to have blind faith. You're supposed to, put your thinking cap on and let's think about this together. God's not going to ask us to do something illogical. God's the one who invented reason. So we don't have to have an unreasonable faith. In fact, some people even think you can reason your way to faith. I have yet to see it done, but apparently it's a theory. It's a working theory out there. And then we have a fourth one. Now, the Anglicans don't have this fourth one. This is unique to Methodists, is that we say experience. That your experience of the divine, eternal, transcendent is a valid location for being informed about God. So we embrace these things. So in Scripture, in tradition, in reason, and in our experience, we know a lot about God. In fact, if we took the rest of the morning here and we just put up sticky notes, big sticky notes on the wall, and listed everything that just you gathered here know about God, we would fill this place up with information about God. But I want to put up this one thing, and I just want you to consider it this morning. If God is infinite, if that's one of the things we say makes God God, then however much we know about God, there is infinitely more to know. The great mystery. Catherine Keller calls it the face of the deep. The tevu of Ohu, she points us to. The presence of God over the face of the deep. that place of becoming, of potentiality. I'm calling it the unknownness. So I give you great encouragement this morning. You know God. I've seen it in your lives. I've heard it in your confessions. We participate and practice it when we gather together. You know God. And my prayer for you as a pastor is that by God's Spirit being present in your life, that you will at deeper and deeper levels know the presence of God in your life, so that you can partner with God to bring about a greater awareness of God's love in the world. That's my hope for us. But there's always a little bit of humility that we need to make sure is tucked in to our nicely formed little package, to our packet. We need to make sure that we build in some mystery, some unknownness. Elizabeth Johnson, in her book, She Who Is, and The Search for the Living God, in both of those reminds us, that's where I get this phrase, if God is infinite, then however much we know about God, there is infinitely more to know. It's a great encouragement. So my prayer for you today is really simple. I pray that you would know God, that you would know God's presence in your life, that it would give you peace and wisdom as you make decisions, that it would give you strength to follow through, that it would heal and give health to your mortal body, that it would inspire you with creativity, that it would connect you to people in ways that you would know God is at work between you. That's my prayer for you. And I also want to say that however much you come to know, there's always infinitely more to know. It's a mystery. That's why it's on a journey. We're on a journey together. So that's my prayer for you.